So hi, everyone. I'm Doreen Tannenbaum, the Strategic Initiatives and Communications Manager with UCI Procurement Services, and welcome to our Department Buyer training session on data security and privacy review. We're also going to be going over our end-to-end procurement process updates right after that presentation, and it will be followed with questions and answers. The recording of today's session will be sent out via email, and our slides are actually available currently there. If you didn't see it in your calendar invite, I'll also drop it in the chat. Next slide, please. So if you visit the top of our website, procurement.uci.edu, we have step-by-step training guides. You can access the training section right there, and videos are also available. You can find interactive courses on UCLC as well, in addition to all of our training sessions that we've recorded in the past. If you would like a one-on-one or group training session, please email us at procurement@uci.edu, and we'll be happy to set something up for you. I'll now turn it over to Snehal Bhatt.
Thank you, Doreen. Thank you all for taking time from your busy schedules to join this training session. We always appreciate when you join and are interested in knowing what's going on. Just as I do at all these training sessions, I also want to again remind everybody that it is everybody's responsibility at the university to be aware of the various requirements, regulations, and policies that everybody is required to comply by. So it's not just the responsibility of central procurement to adhere to all the policies, but it's the requirement of every UC employee to adhere to all the policies. So we only have listed a very few of them here. Actually, there are a lot more that have come into play. Many of the state bills and assembly bills that have been passed at the state level are not even listed here, but we probably will add those because every requirement that has come into play, either by the state, by the federal government, or UCOP, means that there is more work to be done on our end to stay in compliance, and there are more process steps that get added into the procurement process. So I want you all to be very much aware of those, so that, and also if possible, please make the requesters who are requesting the purchase be made aware of many of these requirements, depending on what the purchase is and what kind of funding it is used for, from, so that they understand that it's not going to be an Amazon-like experience where they can just click a button and get what they want. We have to go through many of the compliance requirements, and that's the reason for this training today, why we have the data security and privacy team providing more updates on the things that they need to do. Also want to make sure that everybody understands that there is delegation of authority for approval of purchases, and the signature authority is delegated to procurement. So please make sure that nobody in your department signs any agreements on behalf of the UC because they do not have the delegated authority, and make sure that you get that signed by a procurement professional. Please do not try to make purchases prior to having a PO in place where a PO is required. We do have quite a lot of after the fact POs that are happening at the university that needs to be cut down, and we'll appreciate your support in trying to do that. And as I said, everybody is responsible for making sure they are complying with the policies. So having said that, we are going to talk about, as I mentioned, the supplier security review that Josh is going to go over some of the additional updates, so you all clearly understand what it entails. We also have the privacy team here who's going to talk about the vendor privacy review requirements and give you some tips on what kind of things you should be looking for. I will then give you an update on the procurement process, end-to-end procurement process review that we are going through. We are at a stage where we have completed the analysis phase, and would like to share a little bit about what our findings are and what the next steps are. And then, of course, as Doreen said, we will go through a Q&A session, answer any of your questions that you may have. So with that, I will hand it over to Josh Drummond, who is our CISO at UCI, And Josh, you can take it from here.
All right, thanks, and hello to everybody. I think in a prior training session, we had covered the procurement software and services page, and then our security web page as well. But in today, I wanted to highlight specifically the requester process, and from the requester's point of view, everything we can do to turn around these requests as quickly as possible. And when I say requester, that means different things in different departments. I know at least when I say requester, it's who we're getting the ticket from. But in some departments, that's the actual end user trying to buy whatever. In some cases, it's a administrative assistant. In other cases, in bigger departments, maybe there's a buying specialist. So the requester can mean different things. So but from our point of view, it's who we're getting the request from. And on our security website, that link on the top, that's the page. If you want to bookmark and always get the latest information, we try to keep that up to date. But at a high level, this is the process. And so I wanted to highlight some things that the requester, if they could work with us more on, we'll have a better chance of turning around these requests as fast as possible. And so the first couple steps, I think most of you are aware of. So we have it's currently in a PDF form, but we have a link on our website for the Supplier Security Review Questionnaire. And we ask people to download and complete that as best they can. If you don't know the answers to some questions or you are unsure, there's a box where you can check unsure. And if you do that, we'll reach out back to you and try to clarify things and get the information we need to give a good report back. But basically, download that, email it to security-reviews@uci.edu, and that's how you kick off the process. So what that does behind the scenes is that goes into our ServiceNow instance. We have an OIT, and so that's a IT service management tool. So it gets turned into a ticket, and you should get an email notification about that creation of the ticket and then any updates to it. So keep an eye on that. So if you see something come from UCI ServiceNow, don't ignore it, because it could be information regarding this request. So the quicker you see that and respond to that, the quicker the overall process can go. And so what we do with that initial form is that's the initial triage. That's just basic triage of, is this low risk or high risk? Because if it's low risk, and most of the things we get requests for are low risk, we can basically turn it around quickly, say, hey, no review needed. This is low risk data, low risk service, or you're installing it locally. There's different criteria. And we can turn it around and say no security review needed, and you get to jump to step 5 basically. But sometimes it's a high risk, and so that's the initial process to just determine how deep we do the review. And so that's step 3. And then if it is high risk, though, that's where there's additional steps. And so if we see that it is a high risk from a security point of view, supplier or use case, then what we'll do is we'll create in another system called OneTrust. And so this is specifically our IT risk management tools. So we're going from normal IT request to risk management. And so we'll create an instance in there, and then a supplier review intake questionnaire will then be sent to the requester via that. And that's going to be a more thorough set of questions. So that goes a little bit deeper than that initial intake, because we want to know more about how is this high risk? What's the use case? What are some of the supplier details involved? And so at that point, the requester should monitor their inbox for any emails that are coming from OneTrust, because this is a vendor tool itself. There's only so much customization we can do. So it might look like an email coming from OneTrust. So keep an eye out on that. And then for the requester to fill that out. And then part of that is supplier contact information, because the next step is that we want to send request to the supplier to fill out security and privacy questionnaires if they're applicable. And so those get into the real details of how the supplier manages data, what their service entails. And so, of course, you as a requester aren't going to know all those details. So we're not expecting you to fill that part out. We're expecting them to fill that out. But we are expecting you to communicate to your supplier to expect this, because, you know, an email from OneTrust may be foreign to you. It's super foreign to an external third party. So we recognize that, but the requester is the person or the group that will have that relationship often with the supplier. So they'll often have maybe a sales person contact or a website to go to. And so you can let those people know to expect an email from UCI OneTrust service, and then remind them periodically to complete that, fill that out, because in our experience, that's the biggest wait time, is waiting for the third party to submit the data for us to review. And so all the help that the requester can provide there to make that turnaround quicker tremendously increases the overall turnaround of the request. So communicate your supplier that heads up, this is coming, and then, you know, if you don't see it getting turned around very quickly, you know, continue to remind them to complete that. And then as they're filling that out, so there's a questionnaire of our questions that we like them to fill out. But then in addition to that, any additional security documentation that they have that they can just attach also improves the likelihood of a successful approval from us. So these are things, so these are a lot of acronyms here. I don't expect you to know that, but hopefully the vendor does. And if the vendor does have these, then, you know, these allow us to have a really quick turnaround. So the HECVAT is a higher education vendor assessment tool. And so that's a consortium. If they do a lot of business in higher ed, they've probably already done this, because we're not the only higher ed institution that asks these kinds of questions. So if they answered it for another university, they can just give us, you know, the same things. And so that's the HECVAT form. That's really useful. Any sort of third-party attestation, a SOC 2 report, an ISO certification, PCI attestation of compliance, or any third-party audit or vulnerability assessment, we rank really high, because that's showing that not only are they focused and prioritize security and privacy, but hey, they've got a third party coming out and validating that they're doing these things. So, you know, once we see anything like that, you know, the likelihood of success goes up quite a bit as well. And then lastly, still good, just not as good as the others, but if they don't have a third party, any internal formal documentation that they already have. So if they have a internal information security and or privacy policy that's been formalized, and, you know, providing us a copy of that is helpful for review as well. So again, let them know that, you know, the more that they can provide there, not only the faster turnaround, but the higher likelihood of getting approval happens there. And then also anything with P3, P4 data where the supplier has access to the data or our systems via like a consultant or something like that, they'll need a UC Appendix DS, so it stands for data security. And so the sooner in the process you can let them know that, the better, because we've seen cases where it goes through the security process, the privacy process, all the reviews, then we get down to the contracts part, and then they refuse to include Appendix DS, or there's a lot of red lines involved that requires a lot of back and forth. So the earlier in the process that the supplier can be made aware of that, have their team review it as needed and give us feedback, because we can do two things in parallel, right? Like we don't have to wait until the security review to start that, you know. So earlier in the process that we can start that, the better. And so that's if a high risk review is needed. Then whether it's high risk or low risk, updates will be provided via the ServiceNow. Again, emails from ServiceNow. So to continue to monitor your email updates for emails from that. which will include any follow-up actions or requests for more information will be through that. And then the final kind of security take on it. Approval is always a strong word. It's our suggestion, which to the risk acceptors. And then we will provide, if it's a high risk review, we'll provide a summary report that includes both our security observations and recommendations, and then we include privacy's input into that report as well. And then you can take that and continue your process with the procurement team with that information. And that, in a nutshell, is kind of what we look for the requesters as part of the security review process.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate that update. I hope everybody got a little bit of a sense of the process steps to follow. And I'll go into more details about what we are doing about queue management to what Josh was saying when I talk about the updates on changes we are making or attempts we are making to improve the review times and the procurement processing times. So thank you, Josh. Appreciate this update. And then we will turn it over to now Carolyn and Dorothea to go over the vendor privacy reviews.
Everybody, my name is Carolyn Toneroff. I'm Assistant Campus Privacy Official. And I just wanted to give everybody a quick overview of what kinds of things we look for when we're doing our privacy reviews. I wanted to start by saying that our entire goal here is to make sure that our departments on campus get the software that they need to do their jobs, to perform their services for the campus. And we do have a role to balance the privacy of the individuals whose data are getting used for an actual business purpose. So we do need to balance both of those. And some of the easiest ways that you can make this process easier for you, because this is what we get held up on a lot, is by knowing your data, the data that you are going to be processing or controlling, know your vendor or the supplier, depending on what process you're using, and also recognize privacy red flags ahead of time so you can anticipate that something might take a little bit longer. So first, when we're looking at knowing your data, let's think about what kind of data you're sharing with your vendor. Are we sharing student data? Are we sharing employee data? Are we sharing student data, but there's actually administrators who are making accounts in order to administer this, this software? Are there people who are going to be using this who are targeting in the European Union? Things like that. And then also when we're thinking about personal data, let's try to think broadly. So not only data that we're going to be providing directly, but what kind of data is this vendor going to be collecting from people on behalf of us? So say, for example, we have a employee application, and we can, someone wants to apply to our employee services. They are not going to be necessarily providing us that data that we then upload. They're going to be providing the data directly, but the vendor's collecting it on behalf of us. So that's the same kind of process that we want to think about. Data can come from many different sources, and we want to make sure that we're providing the protections necessary for all of those people. So then the next thing that we like to think about is knowing your vendor. So who is this that's actually collecting and processing data on our behalf? And particularly, what will they be doing with it? Do they share it with others? Who do they share it with, and why do they share it? Please note, and this is something that we do have to come back to more frequently than you would expect, that as a government agency under the Information Practices Act, we are not allowed to sell data for sell or share or rent data, personal data for commercial purposes. And that it gets extended to our vendors. So we can't give it to them and then they sell data. So that's something that we do want to know ahead of time. It might be worthwhile. And you can usually find this out by looking at their privacy policy ahead of time. Also, one thing with the vendor we get hung up on more and more right now is the use of cookies, Google Analytics, use of clickstream tracking, all those trackers. It's useful if you know ahead of time that that's something that they use. Many times they do have the ability to adjust it or turn it off, because we actually have a prohibition from up north about using Google Analytics at this point. They have been identified as very high risk, and we want to make sure that we protect the privacy of everybody who's touching these websites that we have people using. And then also we want to think about who has access to data, how long do they store the data, and where do they store the data, and then how do they use it? Do they actually only use it for the business purposes, or do they use it for marketing? And do they share it with these other marketing companies that then combine it with other data sets, for example? And you would be surprised the companies that end up doing that. So that is something that will slow the process down.
It looks like we lost Carolyn. There's a connectivity issue, so I will jump in and take over. The last thing we want to advise our departments about is recognizing red flags. Some of our vendors out there are a little bit more troublesome and problematic than others. And those are definitely ones that either are very, very small, they don't have the ability to show us that they can safeguard or protect our data, or their business model is purely based on selling the data of their customers. So pay attention. And if they do not allow opt-outs, that can be a challenge for us. And there are some vendors who feel like the geolocation and tracking of client data is not personally identifiable, and that's not consistent with the UC interpretation of personally identifiable information. And another area where we are concerned is we don't like the vendors who have a privacy notice that indicates that they have a right to access, view, or modify communications that are taking place within their application. They can monitor it with reason, but we also have the electronic communications policy where the UC gives our users some privacy rights regarding their electronic communication. So if there is a mismatch between their operations and our UC policy, that's an area that's a potential red flag. But if you know this up front, then you could be thoughtful and choosy when you're selecting your vendors. Good vendors who are able to protect our information, who have the ability to show that if something bad happens, they will notify us, they can respond. Those are the ones that have their risk managed and they get through the privacy reviews much more quickly.
Thank you, Carolyn and Thea, for providing this update on privacy reviews. Hopefully everybody got a chance to get a better understanding of the kind of things that the privacy office is looking at. And so hopefully it will give you an understanding of what you should be looking for and when we need to make sure that the privacy office gets engaged in the review process. If anybody has any questions on any of the things that Josh presented or what Carolyn and Thea presented, please put them in chat. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions you may have. I would like to switch gears now and spend a few minutes talking about our end-to-end procurement review process that we are going through, trying to find ways to improve the process and also find gaps that we have that we may need to close, changes we may need to make in our processes, in our technology, and and in the people's roles and responsibilities. So many of you probably are aware of it and have been involved in this process. We started this process at the beginning of the year. We went through the review of the current state, and there has been a lot of work being done in analyzing the entire process. There have been 3 different Tiger teams that have been formed, one for process, one for technology, and one for people. And supported and facilitated by Pajman and Monica, who have both are with the DFA. And this is upon the request by our CFO and Vice Chancellor, Mary Lou, who has consistently been hearing complaints about procurement process being slow, things taking long. And so she tasked us to take a look at our processes and see what we can do to improve them and reduce the pain points. So this is what it's a continuous improvement project, obviously, trying to streamline the purchasing business processes and help expedite the reviews. As I mentioned, we have tried to identify a lot of the pain points that I will kind of briefly share with you, the high level pain points that we have identified and some of the short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions that we are looking at to help address those pain points. As I mentioned, there has been some Tiger teams that have been formed, that have been involved. So many of you who are on this call probably are aware of it and know what's going on. But I thought that it would be a good time for me to give this update to everybody who attends this meeting so that you all get an idea of the kind of work that is being done. Because anything we try to do or any changes we try to bring in place, you all will be required to help facilitate the change or help in the process of making these improvements. So we cannot make any updates or changes or improvements without your help and support. So what I'm asking today is for you all to help us and collaborate with us so that we can all collectively work on improving our processes. If you can go to the next page. So, essentially, as I mentioned, we're looking at the process, the people, and technology. And I just wanted to highlight this one slide on technology. Essentially, today, the way things are happening is probably not in the correct order. Ideally, what you want is for somebody who wants to purchase something or has a need, they would really just submit a request for the purchase. Then we would go ahead and do the sourcing of it to determine who we buy it from. After that, we would go ahead and do the necessary contracting if it requires a contract, a signed contract from both parties, and then place the order. Invariably, what happens today is the requester actually makes up the determination of where they want to buy it from. So they actually do the sourcing activities before they submit the request. And once they have determined who they want to buy it from, then they will ask someone to put in a request to make the purchase from that source that has already been identified. As you can see here, for the various types of purchases, either it's services, goods through UCI Buy or software and technology, or if we had to do a competitive bid, we have so many different ways we do things. We really don't have one common system to help make the purchase. We use individual units have their own forms that they use for pre-requisition to actually submit the request and then get approvals to make the purchase. And then somebody goes in and enters something in KFS. Many times that KFS request is coming from UCI Buy and not through the manual submission of the requisition. After that, all the contracting activities, as you all know, happens in Outlook. We send emails back and forth and do everything manually. and then it goes to KFS and then UCI buy to place the order. And then again, for software and technology, as Josh had mentioned, there is the ServiceNow activity that happens as tickets are generated by their team, and there is a OneTrust, tool that is used to do the supplier security reviews. And then for RFPs, our RFPs are actually hosted and published on CalUSource. So that's another system that is being used. And so there's so many different systems along with individual manual forms and emails is our way to handle things. So it's pretty disjointed, let's put it that way. If you go to the next slide. There are a few other things. So essentially, not going into the details of everything that has gone on, these are the top 6 areas we thought that emerged from the discovery phase that we went through for the past several months, meeting with all the various Tiger teams on a regular basis. We have come up with these 6 high-level challenges, and they being, as I mentioned, lack of integration across systems. Right now, the systems are disjointed. They don't talk to each other. A lot of things happen outside the systems. And then we try to get everything consolidated and get the purchase made or approved. And that in itself is a challenge for us to keep track of as to where things are, where everybody is at in the process. And, it's very unstructured and very fragmented, which adds to all the confusion, all the lack of visibility, people not knowing where things are, us having to constantly reach out to people and say, hey, what's the status of this? Is this done? All communication going via Outlook and email. Not a very good way to manage the entire process. The inadequate monitoring and support, again, goes to the same thing. We are doing a lot of things offline, not using KFS, which is considered to be our purchasing system. But KFS does not have many of the features that probably are needed for us to actually have a smooth, streamlined process. It also, there's a lot of challenges with the roles and responsibilities of the different people. Who is supposed to do what is also not always very clear. And so we are trying to find ways to figure out and clearly identify who's responsible for what during the entire procurement process, so that everybody knows who's supposed to do what. Obviously, because of all this different processes, different systems, people creating their own ways of handling things, there is lack of clarity. And in the end, it ends up being poor end user experience. So, we end up spending a lot of time, non-value-added time in helping with the purchase, and the departments and the requesters also don't have a very good experience with the whole process. One other challenge that we also constantly face is the lack of knowledge at the requester level. Probably many of you who attend these trainings probably have good understanding, but we don't have any mandatory training or a required training when new buyers come on board or new employees get hired. They really don't have a good understanding of all the various compliance requirements that we have to comply by. And so, with all the turnovers that take place all the time, that makes it even more challenging. So, we need to look at our website as well and see what more can we do to create some micro-learning videos or some specific ways that can help people to know exactly what they need to do. One of the challenges we face is that some people don't do purchases on a regular basis. So they may be going into the system maybe every 2-3 months trying to make a purchase, and they have forgotten how they did things. And then they scramble to figure out what to do, and they get frustrated. We do have a lot of good training material on our website, but for somebody who wants to do something very quick, they may have a challenge to find everything on our website, which does have a very good information, but we maybe, we need to think about how can we get the end users to get what they need in a fast and quick manner. Again, those are the challenges that we are facing. And the next slide kind of highlights some of our immediate term actions we are taking, the midterm potential solutions, and then the long term, of course, is where we'll be looking at a system that helps everything end to end. And that's a long-term goal if we can get to it. But as I was mentioning, right now, there seems to be a lot of complaints going up all the way to the provost and the chancellor and to the vice chancellors that procurement process is taking long, and they seem to be not very happy with the way things are happening. Now, of course, it's all very it depends on the situation. When you look at the big scheme of things, we process thousands of POs in a year. In a week, actually, we have multiple thousands of POs. In a day, sometimes we have 1,000 requisitions coming in. So compared to the volume that we process, the number of challenges and issues may be very, very small. But even then, even those small and very, very, fraction of a percent of challenges and concerns and complaints that get raised need to be addressed. We can't have anybody complaining to the provost, the vice chancellors, or the chancellor about procurement process being slow or things not happening at the expected pace that they would like to happen. So to address that, we actually have established a weekly communication with the data security team, so Josh's team, privacy team, and risk services and procurement. We all come together and talk about some of the aging POs that have been waiting for responses. As Josh was saying, invariably it is the suppliers who are slow in responding, and we are just sitting and waiting for them to respond, or the departments may be trying to get the information and they don't have it, so we sit on things. And that has created some POs that are aging for more than 60, 90 plus days. And we are tracking those POs now on a weekly basis. We are sending communication to not only the departmental buyers, but also to the requesters, and trying to push things through so that we can actually get rid of those aging POs and get more current. And this is something we are going to continue to do until we get to a point where everything is addressed within a very reasonable time. And we are looking at it maybe within 30 days. So this is where we are going to need all of your help to help us move things along faster and quicker. If something is sitting and waiting, we need to make sure that the requester is clearly in communications and understands where their purchase request stands. And as long as they understand the rationale behind why things are not moving, they will have a less likelihood to complain. But currently, with the systems we have, we don't have a way for them to have visibility to where things are. And that's why we need to keep them informed in our standard way of doing things, which is via emails. Okay, so that's the immediate term solutions that we are putting in place. We are now starting to add our requesters into the communication so they are aware of where things are, and maybe they can help us move things along if they have the answers. Okay, as Josh was saying, we also are looking for you to help us reach out to the suppliers when we are waiting on things from suppliers, so that they understand that they need to move on things quicker and faster, because our requesters don't have the patience to just sit and wait for them to respond. So, we can help wherever you want us to help. We're more than happy to do that, but we also are expecting you to help us in moving things along faster. In the interim term or the medium term, we are looking at putting some things in place where we can formalize some of the roles and responsibilities so everybody understands who's expected to do what. We are also trying to, create some, expert community or community of practice where people can actually, hopefully create a platform where people can look at, quickly something that they need and get the answers to it. We definitely want to increase the knowledge and change management piece. As I mentioned, we are seriously looking at having a basic training on procurement as a mandatory training for all new hires. So they have a good understanding, at least a basic understanding of what it takes to make purchases at UCI. Other thing that we are looking at is we are looking at the KFS system itself, and we are trying to see if we can make enhancement to the system so that some of the process steps that we are doing outside the system can actually be incorporated into the system. The best systems are those that incorporate all the compliance requirements into the process. That way we are not doing all of that outside the system or as individual processes. So that is also what we are looking at, and we have identified many different things that can be done in KFS. Obviously, we will need the support from the KFS and the OIT team to be able to make those necessary changes to this KFS system to incorporate these compliances into the workflow. So that's the medium term goal. And the long term, of course, as I mentioned, we are going to look at what systems are available or what is it that we should be implementing that will have this end-to-end procurement process all operating as one system and don't have to shuttle between multiple systems. But that's a long-term goal. All right, so as I had mentioned, we did have multiple Tiger teams that were formed. And here are the team members that actually participated in the process technology and the people Tiger teams. We want to thank each and every one of you for your contributions and support in the analysis phase. And as you all know, we are going to go through the design phase in the next month, in the month of November and December. And we are looking for your support in the design phase as well. So if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is the kind of the timeline of when we actually started the discovery phase all the way back in March, April timeframe. And did the thorough analysis in September, October with Tiger teams. As I said, we are going through the design phase in November, December. Some of the changes we are already putting in place, and others we hope to put in place in the first quarter of 2024. And of course, ongoing, we are not going to stop. So those are some of the highlights I wanted to give to everybody, so everybody is aware of what's going on and kind of things that we are looking at. What I would ask everyone is, if you don't mind, whenever there is a request that comes in for any purchases that you are helping, please make sure to keep your requesters in the loop, keep them informed of where things are, so that they have visibility and they have awareness of their purchases. If it's taking longer, please share with them why it's taking longer, so that they don't keep wondering that, hey, I put in the request 3 months ago, 4 months ago, I don't know where things are, what's going on, I haven't gotten what I want. And this is when the chairs and the department deans, the school's deans, actually are going and mentioning this to the provost and to the chancellors, even in some of their communications. And that's what's getting us in a situation where we need to do something to fix it. Not that we don't want to do it, we definitely want to fix whatever we can, but keeping them informed. And if there's anything that we can do as a support from the central procurement team, please do not hesitate to reach out to us and let us know. If it's an urgent purchase, we always try to help expedite things along. But if we don't know, we can't help. So we are asking you all to help us. Also, if you are trying to reach us via phones, we are transitioning to Teams phone, and many of our team members are going to have new extensions. So please keep an eye, look for the extensions on our website for our team members, because we may have some new extensions. But if you ever have any questions, you can always email procurement@uci.edu. That is your fastest and safest bet, and we will address anything that you send to procurement@uci.edu in a very expeditious manner.
Thank you, Snehal. We're going to open up the floor for some questions. We had one question come in via chat. If we did it this way, not sourcing first, are we sending the need to you guys, asking you to source, or are we sourcing ourselves after we identify?
Well, so Kaylee, we always encourage everybody to first and foremost look at any of our contracted suppliers that we already may have in our systems, not those that are onboarded in KFS. Please understand that just because a vendor is onboarded in KFS does not mean that they are an approved and preferred supplier. We have a list of many contracted suppliers for all different kinds of categories. And so the first and foremost place for somebody to look for a supplier for a particular purchase should be looking at the list of contracted suppliers that we have, and that's available on our website. And Doreen, I think, is putting in the links to those the lists, and that's what you should do to try to source these supplier. Again, depending on the type of purchase it is, if you need to do a competitive bid, you should reach out to procurement office at the earliest, so we can help you with the competitive bidding requirements. Otherwise, we will be more than happy to help source any of your suppliers. If the purchase is a significant purchase, if it's a very small dollar purchase, you are welcome to look for a supplier on your own. But then also we have the requirement for the small business policy and things of that nature. So as long as we are looking into all the compliance requirements when you are looking at the sources, we can work collaboratively on it. It doesn't necessarily have to be you doing it or us doing it individually, separately. It can be a collective effort where we both join forces and find the right source for the purchase. Hope that answers your question.
We had another question coming in on from Niroshi. If you can, just a second, Niroshi.
To look into UCI buy too. That's a very good and easy way to source, and they're all contractual suppliers, and it's very easy process to go to.
True. Thank you, sir. No, thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, so obviously, going to UCI buy and looking at the suppliers that are there, they are all contracted suppliers, as Saurav said. So that is also a good source for you to look at.
Yeah.
So Niroshi, go ahead and unmute yourself, please, and ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Doreen, and thanks, Snehal. I just wanted to comment that, Snehal, when you were mentioning the measures that are going to be taken in the months to come, I just wanted to reiterate the importance of training. Your office has been, my experience has been great with your office. I've gone to Andrew with a lot of questions, your website, procurement at uci.edu, all of that's great. But, and even these buyers, these department buyer meetings are really helpful, but I think there really needs to be these types of meetings or trainings for just core procurement, service agreements, like the training that we receive on the department side is really varies. And a lot of times, to expect someone to figure out how to interpret all the clauses in a contract agreement, is a big ask. And so we're just kind of blindly doing things with the Central Campus is operating under the expectation that we know exactly what we're doing when we're submitting these documents, and I think that training campus, there's just such a dearth of training across all Central Campus offices. And you guys admittedly do a much better job in terms of providing us with resources. But I just want to support and 100 times the idea of providing training, like on a forum like this or whatever, in terms of basic procurement, things like what information should people include in a requisition. Like, I know, but as an approver, the stuff that I've seen in the past has been woefully scant in terms of details. And if we were to get audited, we would get dinged. And another big thing is like service agreements. Again, I think there's just so much that could probably be split into like multiple sessions, but just going into there and explaining to people like, hey, this clause, this is what it's getting at. So when you're speaking to your PI or whoever and you're making a purchase, these are the kinds of things you want to think about when you're answering that question. So so thank you guys for all your help. You guys, I really do appreciate all the support that procurement's provided over the years that I've worked. But much like with other offices, I think there's a huge opportunity and need for training.
Thank you, Niroshi. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, I mean, there's so much that can be trained, and obviously expecting everybody to become experts in everything, is not a feasible expectation, right? We don't expect even our teams, internal teams in central procurement, go to our contracts analysts for support and help in some of the clauses and some of the terms, because that's their expertise, right? They manage contracts and they handle contracts. So you're right that there is always room for training, but then it also happens that people get overwhelmed and they say, well, am I expected to be an expert in everything? Probably not. That's why, as you said, you work with Andrew and his team, who I think do a fantastic job of supporting and helping anybody who needs help. But yeah, some of the basics, to your point, that's what we are talking about, is like have some basic understanding for people to know what is it that they should have, at least some basic minimum understanding. So when they're talking to their faculty and the PIs, they can talk more intelligently rather than just be paper pushers and just not knowing anything about what they're asking. So thank you for sharing that. Yes, then that's what we are going to look at, is like what are the various key elements in a procurement process that people should know. And it will vary. We may have some training that is basic only for PI, so they understand all the compliance requirements, whereas the buyers will have a little more in-depth training about exactly what their expected role is and what they should be doing or they should be aware of. So thank you for sharing that.
We had another question come in. If a software purchase that has been paid for with a PAL card and used in years past that is low value, the most current security review questionnaire has been completed, reviewed, and approved, low risk, by security reviews, has no contract/documents that require signature, are we able to pay for this with a PAL card?
Yes. So thank you for actually asking this question. So I did want to mention this, and then thank you for reminding me of that. We actually have updated our website with very specific instructions on software and IT purchases. So we haven't actually provided any training on that, but if you will go to our website and you will click on under procurement or contracts, you will see a link for or a click for IT and software purchases.
I just
if you
added
click
it
on
to
those,
the chat.
there you go. If you will click on it and you will open it, you will see we have provided very detailed steps that you need to follow for those purchases. And of course, that links to what Josh had shown and shared, because we are linking into Josh's for security reviews. And we have a link to privacy for privacy review. But at the bottom of that, it does say that if you want to purchase it on a PAL card, here's what are the requirements, or here's when you can actually purchase. And you listed some of the times when you actually can use PAL card for the purchase. So the answer, a short answer to your question is yes.
We had another question come in. Is the service purchase agreement request form intended for use as a formal procurement form for services, or is it currently only for departments participating in the procurement services pilot program to use?
So Isabel, anybody can use that form. It is meant to help the departments kind of go through a checklist of things that they should be looking at or thinking about when they submit their request for purchases. So we have not rolled it out across the campus yet because we have received very little feedback. We were hoping to receive a lot more feedback on the use of the form. but we have received a little bit of a feedback for making some tweaks and improvements to the checklist. So we actually just were discussing this this week, yesterday, on some of the tweaks we can make based on the feedback we have received from the pilot program. But it's available for anybody who wants to use it. If somebody is willing to look at the forms for a checklist and the form for what all the things they should be aware of, we'll be more than happy to share it with anybody who's interested in trying it out and using it. Because if you will use it, I guarantee you the back and forth that you have with our teams will reduce significantly, and the processing time will also improve quite a bit. So we have not posted that form yet on our website, only because it's still in the pilot stage. And as I said, we wanted to make sure that we get some good feedback from everybody before we post it and make it an official form for everybody to use. So if you don't mind, just send an email to procurement@uci.edu for anybody who's interested in getting that form, and we'll be more than happy to send it to you for your use. And we'll love your feedback as to how we can make that form more better and more user friendly. Yes, Amy?
So I was just looking at the link that you sent for the step-by-step processes, right?
Yes.
For yeah. So, well, first of all, that doesn't have anything about the School of Medicine in there, and we had to follow a different process. So I think that these lists, although helpful, aren't really a one-stop shop to do these things, because it doesn't contain all of the information that's needed for the steps, right? It often includes the variant, right, from the regular step, but it doesn't kind of integrate that back into the steps that you have to take for a purchase.
I think most School of Medicine folks come to us and follow the same process, except many times there is a data security review that happens at the medical center side. But those are the situations that are exceptions that we have to follow exception process. But otherwise, we do use Josh's team quite a lot for School of Medicine.
No, we are supposed to
as well.
route through our School of Medicine side.
That School of Medicine is part of the campus. It's not different from the campus. You're still part of the campus. College of Health Science is also part of the campus. So you may have to buy your laptops from Health IT because they add more security to your laptops. But School of Medicine is still part of the campus. It's not.
Well, just so you know that when we're getting those, the longest step for us is waiting for somebody over in the medical center to.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
Trust me, I know that very well.
And that it doesn't address those steps here. So it's not. I'm just saying it would be good if somebody would sit down with people when they're looking at these tasks to see, okay, does this have the information that you need on the department side to get the work done? Not just the notifications, I think, but like, can you follow this and get the information? Because I think that most of the information here, and I totally understand why, is almost for experts already, right? Like, oh, we're assuming you know all of this other stuff, and so we're just going to give you the Delta information.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you, we schedule something where you sit down with our team and, walk through that and see where it differs for School of Medicine. And so we make sure that we incorporate whatever needs to be incorporated.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Again, if
Any
you'd
other
like
questions?
the form, please email procurement@uci.edu. I do not have the form, so I will be happy to forward it to procurement, but please email them directly.
And I think we are already past 3 o'clock. I wanted to make sure that please fill out the feedback form. We ask that you do that so that we know what training we can provide, what information we can provide, how we can increase our communication, how we can work more collaboratively together. So I would really like to see if there is way for us to make things better for all of you. Okay. So Niroshi, like you were saying, if you think that there are specific training modules that we can provide that will help, please share those with us so we can cater these training sessions to what is beneficial to the campus.
Hey, Stay Hall, this is James.
Yes.
Good job. Very informative. Are there any training materials, PowerPoints, or anything to the such as it relates to when and how to do a bid and when and how to use an SSPR?
We do have training sessions on SSPR. When to use an SSPR is probably baked into our processes. So that's a good point that we may want to think about. And we have not conducted a training on competitive bidding or how to do the RFP process, but that's something that we can think about.
Yeah, let's talk about
So we
those.
did a bidding and SSPR form back in July. I just forwarded the slides. I'll also put a link to our training page. Take a look at the video, and if you have any additional questions, again, we are always available to do a one-on-one, or we can expand that training session as well.
I'd like to remind people that actually the requisition or purchase order would flag the SSPR form requirement message there and also provide a link to it. If that purchase request qualify to complete the SSPR form.
Correct. So we have a flag in KFS, James, for any purchases that are on federal funds over $10,000, or if it's over $100,000. Otherwise, it actually puts a flag saying you need to submit either a competitive bid or SSPR.
Yeah, I'm looking for, and we can talk about this on a monthly collaboration. I'm looking to educate the masses over here at the Health Center, Health Campus to when to use an SSPR. We'll start with that one.
Right. Good
okay,
point.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Very good.
Yep. Appreciate all your time and your collaboration.